I should have known better. Looking back, I can pinpoint the exact moment everything started falling apart. The moment I first saw Ethan Grant Sullivan, I knew he was going to be a problem. Laura and I had been together for almost 2 years. We had built a life, a home, a future. Everything felt right. She was beautiful, smart, and mine, or so I thought. We had our own little circle of friends, people who had naturally meshed together over time. But then Ethan showed up, weaving himself into our group like a goddamn snake slithering into a nest. He was the kind of guy that screamed trouble charming in that cheap, rehearsed way, the kind that only worked on people who refused to see past the surface. At first, I watched quietly. I didn't want to be the jealous boyfriend. I didn't want to be that guy. But it didn't take a genius to see what Ethan was doing. The way he touched Laura just a little too much. The way he leaned in when he talked to her, invading her space, making it look casual. The way his eyes lingered on her, filled with intentions he didn't even bother to hide when he thought no one was looking. But I was looking. I confronted Laura about it once at a party. The words were out before I could stop them. "Laura, that guy is a snake. He's playing you." She blinked, taken aback, then laughed. Like I had just accused her of falling for a magician's trick. "Oh my God, Ryan. Seriously?" She rolled her eyes. "Ethan's like that with everyone. He's just friendly." Friendly. Right. That's what she called it. I clenched my jaw, choosing my next words carefully. "Laura, I don't cheat and I won't stay with anyone who cheats on me," I told her. "So if you ever decide you want something else, someone else, you better make that choice before it's too late." I expected her to get mad, but she didn't. She just scoffed, waved a dismissive hand, and walked off to grab another drink. That night, I left the party alone. Maybe I should have ended it right then and there. Maybe I should have seen the signs for what they were. But love makes you blind. And I, stupid, trusting fool that I was still wanted to believe in her. But then things started changing. Ethan's attitude toward me shifted. He no longer pretended to be friendly when no one else was watching. Instead, he looked at me like I was nothing, like he had already won something I didn't even realize I was losing. It didn't take much to put two and two together. I went on high alert, but I kept my mouth shut. I needed proof. And soon enough, I got it. Something changed in Laura. At first, it was small little shifts in her routine, tiny cracks in our normal. She started smiling more when she checked her phone, laughing at messages she wouldn't share. She'd come home late from work, offering vague excuses about staying longer at the office. Then, there were the nights she didn't want to be touched. Laura had always been affectionate, always curled up against me in bed, always reaching for me. But suddenly, she was tired, too stressed, too distracted. I knew better. One night, I asked her outright, "Everything okay?" She nodded too quickly. "Yeah. Why?" "You seem distant." Laura sighed, rolling her shoulders like I was exhausting her. "Ryan, not everything is about you. I'm just dealing with a lot right now." I wanted to believe her, but my gut told me otherwise. Then came the final straw, the moment I knew, without a doubt, that my worst fear was real. It was a Thursday evening when she told me about her aunt. I was sitting on the couch, half watching the news when she came in, wringing her hands like she had bad news. "My Aunt Maria is sick," she said, her voice soft, eyes carefully trained on me. "She called me at work today and asked if I could come spend the weekend with her. Something about the way she said it didn't sit right." I leaned forward. "She called you at work?" She hesitated for half a second before nodding. "Well, not her, exactly. Her neighbor. Maria doesn't have a phone. No phone. But somehow, she had managed to send a message through her neighbor?" I stared at Laura, feeling something coil in my chest. "I'll drive you," I offered, watching her reaction. "No!" she blurted, too fast. "I mean, it's fine. I'll just take my car." That was it. That was all I needed. I didn't argue. I didn't press her for more details. I just sat back, nodded, and said, "Okay." But inside, I was already making plans. The next morning, she kissed me goodbye, eyes bright with something that wasn't sadness. Excitement. She had no idea I knew. I watched her drive away, felt the weight of it settle in my chest, and whispered, "Goodbye, Laura." Because as far as I was concerned, she was already gone. An hour later, my phone buzzed. It was Luke. Luke and I had been through hell together. We trained together, served together, and watched each other's backs in places where a wrong step could get you killed. And now, once again, he was watching my back. She just pulled into my complex, he said, his voice calm but edged with something darker. I closed my eyes. Alone? No, Luke said, and I could hear the anger in his voice now. Ethan just parked next to her. I swallowed the rage burning its way up my throat. Get it on video, already recording. I sat there, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles ached, as I listened to Luke describe what I already knew was happening. She's all over him, man, he said, kissing him, holding on to him like they're in some goddamn romance movie. I could see it in my head the way she was probably smiling at him, touching him the way she used to touch me. They're getting her suitcase, Luke continued, putting it in his trunk. His bag is already in there. Looks like they're going away for the weekend. A weekend. A whole damn weekend. I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. You got his license plate? Crystal clear. I nodded to myself, breathing through the tightness in my chest. Send me the video. 30 seconds later, my phone buzzed again. I opened the file, and there it was, undeniable proof. Laura, my Laura in another man's arms. I watched as they kissed, as they loaded the bags, as they laughed like they had no worries in the world. It hit me like a goddamn truck. It was one thing to suspect, another thing to know. But to see it? To have it shoved in my face like this? I felt something in me break, but I didn't yell, didn't cry, didn't punch a hole through the wall like I wanted to. Instead, I did what I'd been trained to do. I stayed calm. I made a plan. Because of this wasn't over. I sat in our apartment, staring at the wall, the weight of everything pressing down on me. The video played on a loop in my mind, Laura smiling at him, kissing him, touching him like he was hers. Like I had never existed. I should have felt rage, but all I felt was hollow. I had spent years building a life with her, giving her everything, believing in us. And she had thrown it away like it meant nothing. Like I meant nothing. I stood up, grabbed my keys, and drove straight to Walmart. I walked in, calm and steady, and found the store manager in the meat department. I told him I needed boxes 40 of them. Sturdy ones. No problem, he said. We've got a fresh batch in the back. You can pick them up in the morning. Perfect. Next, I made a call to an old friend, Paul. He ran a roadside towing business. I need a favor, I said. Paul chuckled. Don't you always? I told him where Laura's car was. Flatbed it back to our apartment. Park it in her space like nothing ever happened. There was a pause. Then a low whistle. Damn, man. That bad? Worse. He didn't ask any more questions. Consider it done. By the time I got home, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I grabbed my laptop, burned the video onto a couple of discs, then transferred it onto a jump drive. I played one of the discs on our 65-inch TV, watching it in full clarity. There she was, my fiancé, smiling, laughing, kissing Ethan like he was the love of her life. The rage came then, a slow, burning thing deep in my chest. But I didn't act on it. Not yet. Instead, I grabbed a beer, sat back, and planned. The next morning, I picked up the boxes from Walmart and took them home. I stacked them in the living room, then started packing. I didn't rush. I wasn't sloppy. I separated my things from hers, folded her clothes neatly, and packed everything with care. But when I got to the bathroom, something dark and twisted inside me took over. I pulled 2 bottles of her Summer's Eve douche from the cabinet. Then I grabbed a morning after pill from the drawer, placed it on a bright red plastic picnic plate, and set it right on top of the boxes by the door where she wouldn't be able to miss it. Underneath, I left a note. Call Ethan. Remind him what I warned him about. Tell him to buy some good running shoes. And pray they don't wear out before I find him, Laura called that night. I let it go to voicemail. She called again the next morning, then in the afternoon. Finally, on Sunday, I answered. Hey, babe, she said, her voice sugary sweet. I miss you. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the boxes stacked by the door. Yeah? She sighed dramatically. Aunt Maria's not doing great. I might need to stay another couple of days. I almost laughed. She thought she was getting away with it. Thought I was sitting here, waiting for her, believing every word. I kept my voice even. Do what you need to do, Laura. Take care of her. She sighed again, a little too happily. I love you. I hung up. Tuesday night, I waited. Luke had given me the heads up. She's on her way, he said. They pulled into the parking lot about 10 minutes ago. I watched from the window of our darkened apartment as a car pulled up 2 doors down. Ethan's car. Laura climbed out, suitcase in hand, and closed the trunk quickly, like she didn't want anyone to see. Then she walked toward our apartment, her steps slow and hesitant. She didn't even notice her car sitting in its usual spot. She had no idea what was waiting for her inside. I moved away from the window and took a deep breath. This was it. She opened the door, stepped inside, and froze. The boxes were the first thing she saw, stacked neatly, lined up along the walls. Then her eyes fell on the red plate. I watched her from the dining room doorway as her face drained of color. Her hand trembled as she reached for the note. She read it, her lips parting, her breath hitching. Then she looked up and saw me. Ryan, I don't. I cut her off. My voice was cold, dead. Just take your shit and get out. She blinked rapidly, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to find the right words. But there were no right words. Not anymore. Ryan, please. You spent 4 days screwing him, I said, my voice quiet but sharp as a knife. Then you stayed 2 extra days. So he must be better than me, huh? Bigger? Or maybe he just does something I don't. Tears welled in her eyes. No, it wasn't like that. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Wasn't it? I knew what you were doing, Laura. Knew before you even left. I saw you. I have the video. Her eyes widened. Video? Oh yeah. I nodded. Want to see it? Her whole body started shaking. I took a step closer. You thought I was stupid. Thought you could lie to my face and get away with it. You've been screwing him for months, haven't you? She whimpered. I smirked. And you thought you could keep doing it after we got married? She collapsed onto the couch, sobbing, but I didn't care. I turned, walked to the door, and opened it wide. Take your douche. Take your pill. And get the hell out. She looked up at me, mascara running down her cheeks, her hands shaking. Ryan, please don't say another word, I snapped. I don't want to hear your voice. I don't want to see your face. You're dead to me. She let out a broken sob. I didn't care. Leave, I said again, my voice final. Before I do something I won't regret. She stood up slowly, grabbed her suitcase with trembling hands, and walked toward the door. She hesitated for a second, looking at me like she wanted to say something. I just stared. Finally, she stepped past me, out into the night. I slammed the door shut behind her. And just like that, she was gone. The silence after she left was deafening. I stood there for a long time, staring at the door, my hands clenched so tight my knuckles ached. Laura was gone. Everything I had built with her, everything I had believed in it, was all gone too. I should have felt relief, should have felt free, but all I felt was empty. I turned back toward the room, my eyes landing on the red plate. The bottles of douches, the morning after pill. A cruel joke, but not a lie. Laura had taken everything else, but she left that behind. Coward. I took a deep breath, walked over, and swept the plate into the trash. Then I grabbed the last copy of the video, slid it into an envelope, and put it on top of the boxes, just in case she ever forgot why this happened. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her smiling at him, saw her pressed against him, holding on to him like he was her whole damn world. I turned onto my side, facing the empty space beside me. This bed used to be ours. Now, it was just mine. And it always would be. A week passed, then 2, then a month. Laura never came back. She never called, never tried to explain. Maybe she knew it wouldn't make a difference. Maybe she was too busy chasing another thrill. It didn't matter. I went on with my life. Got up every morning, went to work, trained at the gym, laughed with friends, pretended I was fine. Some days I even believed it. Until one night, 2 months later, when I was sitting in a quiet restaurant with some friends, and she walked in. She spotted me instantly. Her eyes widened, her breath caught. She hesitated for half a second before making a beeline for my table. Ryan, she breathed, her voice thick with something like hope. I didn't say a word. I just sat back in my chair, staring at her like she was a stranger. Because she was. She swallowed hard, her eyes darting to my friends, then back to me. I just need 5 minutes. My lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. 5 minutes? She nodded quickly, her hands wringing together. Please. I exhaled sharply, then glanced at my watch. Clock's ticking. She let out a shaky breath. Ryan, I made a mistake. I raised an eyebrow. Which one? Lying to me? Sneaking around behind my back? Screwing Ethan while I was waiting for you at home? She flinched. I know, I cut her off, leaning forward, my voice low and calm. The real mistake you made, Laura, was thinking I wouldn't find out. Tears welled in her eyes. I was stupid, I know that now. Ethan, he didn't care about me. He used me. A dry chuckle escaped my throat. And now that he's done with you, you're here. She swallowed hard. I never stopped loving you, Ryan. Not for a second. I tilted my head. That's funny. You looked pretty damn in love when you were climbing all over him in that parking lot. She broke. Right there in the middle of the restaurant, she broke. Tears streamed down her face, her body shook, and she covered her mouth to stifle a sob. I just stared. Ryan, she choked out, please. I exhaled, shaking my head slowly. You know, I said, my voice almost thoughtful, if Ethan hadn't dumped you or if I hadn't caught you, you wouldn't be here right now. She froze. If things had gone your way, you'd still be sneaking around behind my back, I continued, still playing house with me while screwing him every chance you got. She shook her head wildly. No, you would, I said simply, because that's who you are. More tears fell. I can change, Ryan. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was pathetic. You don't change who you are, Laura. You just get better at hiding it. Silence stretched between us. Then, finally, she whispered, I'm so sorry. I leaned back, studying her for a long moment. Then I stood. My friends went quiet, watching me, watching her. I reached into my pocket, pulled out a few bills, and tossed them onto the table. Then I looked down at her. Goodbye, Laura. And with that, I walked away. I didn't look back, not even once. That night, I slept like a man with nothing left to lose. Laura was gone this time, for good. There were no more tears, no more pleading, no more fake apologies. She had played her game and lost. I should have felt satisfied, should have felt like I had won something. But in reality, all I had done was cut out a piece of my life that had already rotted. Nothing is left to do now but move on, or so I thought. A few months passed. I had nearly forgotten about Ethan, about the bastard who had laughed in my face while screwing the woman. I thought I would marry. Nearly. Then one morning, the news broke. Local businessman Ethan Grant Sullivan was found dead behind a high-end restaurant last night. Authorities described the murder as brutal and calculated. Nothing was stolen. The attack was personal. I watched the broadcast in silence. A reporter stood outside a crime scene, grim-faced, talking about how the police had no leads. How Ethan had been beaten so badly that his own mother could barely identify the body. How whoever had done it had left him in a dumpster like trash. Like, that's all he ever was. I sipped my coffee, listening, watching. Then the screen changed, showing a close-up of a single black lily among the funeral flowers. A card is attached. I leaned forward. The camera zoomed in on the note. Ethan, you stand condemned. Not by a court of law, but by the weight of the lives you've shattered. You preyed on trust, turned vows into lies, and left nothing but ruin in your wake. Only you and I know that I was the last to see you alive. And before your final breath, I asked you, was it worth it? Was breaking homes and hearts worth the price? Worth losing the decades you had left? Your death is not vengeance, it is justice. A sentence long overdue. Consider it the first installment of your debt. And as I looked into your eyes, I told you this time, it's your turn to know what it feels like to be discarded, broken, and left with nothing. Goodbye, Ethan. Judgment has been passed. The signature at the bottom was simple. S. Judge. The Scarlet Judge. That's what the news called him. A name was whispered through the city, tied to a handful of other deaths, people who had made enemies, who had hurt the wrong person one too many times. Some called him a monster. Others called him justice. But as I sat there, the coffee cooling in my hands, I found myself wondering, did Laura know? Did she wake up that morning, check her phone, and see that the man she threw everything away for had been dumped in an alley like a pile of garbage? Did she feel fear, regret, or was she already looking for the next Ethan? The next thrill? I'd never know. And I didn't care. A week later, I stood outside the cemetery, watching from a distance as Ethan was lowered into the ground. Laura wasn't there. I smirked to myself. Figures. But I wasn't alone. Across the grave, on the other side of the burial, stood another man. His face was unreadable, his stance relaxed, but his eyes never left the casket. I didn't know him. But something about the way he stood there, silent and unmoving, made my skin prickle. Then, as the last shovelful of dirt fell, he turned and disappeared into the background, like he had never been there at all, a ghost, a shadow, a judge. I let out a slow breath, stuffing my hands into my pockets as I turned away from the cemetery. I had no regrets, no doubts, no sympathy. Ethan had made his choices. Laura had made hers. And me? I was finally free. The past was buried. The chapter was closed, and I was never looking back.